Is going to answer the question, what's the point of cultural relations in the 21st century? He's John Whitehead, the director of the British Council here in Berlin. Prior to coming to Germany, he was director of Thailand and the London-based director of English language, responsible for the policy and strategic framework of the British Council global activity in English. He was a lecturer in education at the University of Manchester from 1984 until 1989. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome with me Mr. Whitehead.
Do you need sound also for your presentation? You can just ignore mine. It's very sensitive.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Very nice to be here. Thank you very much to Mark Donfried and the team here at the the ICD for inviting me. I'm actually quite a regular visitor and have met lots of people at various events here. It's always a great pleasure to come. And it's also an enormous pleasure to speak after a good friend of mine, Mike Hardy, who, of course, we worked together when he was working for many years at the British Council. And I must say Mike had an enormous influence on the direction of the work in the British Council, particularly related to the issues of cultural diversity and cultural diplomacy. I've called this session, "What's the point of cultural relations in the 21st century?" But of course, that raises the first big question about what is cultural relations, or what are cultural relations. We're here in this very distinguished building, the centre, the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy. Well, in the British Council, we don't use the word cultural diplomacy. We tend to use the word cultural relations. I don't think it's only a question of semantics, and in the long run, possibly it doesn't matter. But what matters really, it seems to me, to continue from what Mike was so eloquently articulating, what matters really is how we respond in today's world to all of the issues, difficulties and differences with an agenda which is meaningful and appropriate. And I was really interested in just the last couple of minutes, the response to the question which you asked there, because the whole issue about what governments are doing and then what other organisations are doing, whether they're agencies funded by governments or independent agencies, or indeed academic organisations are doing in response to this, is very different. And I think, one thing I would like to say just before I begin, perhaps to be a little bit provocative, I think to carry on also from Mike's point there, the role of governments is very, very different today from what it used to be even 5-10 years ago. And I think when it comes to cultural relations, then I think the role of governments is very, very different, and which is why in the British Council, although some of our funding, actually only 15% now of our funding comes from the British government, we're very keen to maintain what we call arm's length from government in terms of our own editorial independence, a bit like the BBC. Anyway, what I thought I would do fairly quickly is to tell you a little bit about what we mean by cultural relations and how it works for us. And then I'm very happy to have a discussion, if we have time, to look at things in a bit more detail. So, the British Council, first of all. It's important to understand what the purpose of the British Council is, how we define our purpose and how we define exactly what we do. It says here, I'm not sure whether you can read that from the back, but the British Council creates international opportunities for the people of the UK and other countries and builds trust between them worldwide. And that is our definition of cultural relations. That's where we begin. The British Council is in some ways, yes, a cultural institute, but we're very different from many other cultural institutes. I work with all of the European cultural institutes here in Berlin, and of course also institutes from other parts of the world. We're very, very different from the French next door, for example, I've got lots of admiration for the work which the French Institute does and their work in cultural relations. It's very different from what we do. So we understand cultural relations as creating opportunities and building trust. And that's not the same thing as sort of doing arts events or whatever. We were founded in 1934 by a royal charter, and that's a very, very British sort of thing, really. There are quite a few organisations founded by royal charter. It just means that the king in the time gave us the status we needed to exist as an organisation. But of course, given that we were founded by a royal charter, it's very important that everything we do actually is in line with that royal charter. It defines what we're allowed to do, and the royal charter sets out 4 main areas which give us the credentials we have to operate in the world. Promoting cultural relations and understanding, promoting a wider knowledge of the United Kingdom, developing a wider knowledge of the English language, and encouraging cultural, scientific and technological and other educational cooperation between the UK and the countries we work with. I think if we look at the area of cultural relations, one of the challenges for us, or for any organisation working as an international cultural relations body, is focus and a strategic sort of drive. And so we have deliberately focused our work in 3 main areas. And we work in English, we work in the arts, and we work in education and society. Our global network means that we operate physically in 110 countries around the world, but we also operate in another 20 or 30 countries without a physical presence. And so we've got a pretty impressive and wide network throughout the world to draw on as a global organisation. Moving on to a definition of cultural relations, I think the best way of describing it is what we call the international relations positioning spectrum. At the one end of the spectrum, you've got aid, which is a very important aspect of the work of cultural relations, richer countries giving money to poorer countries, in a nutshell, to help them develop their infrastructure and provide opportunities for the people who live in those countries. Right at the other end, of course, which you could argue is a sort of cultural relations perspective, although I wouldn't want to go that far, is military action, sanctions, coercion. It's certainly a relationship between 2 countries. In the middle, you've got a whole sort of spectrum of activities. And the work of the British Council, as you can see from this spectrum here, is sort of somewhere in the middle. In fact, if you like, aid, access to opportunity, exchange, promotion, projection, and power are the 5 steps along this spectrum, or if you want to put it in more simple language, giving, opening, sharing, boasting, shouting, and shooting. Now, we obviously, the British Council, would certainly want to distance ourselves very, very strongly from the right-hand edge of that spectrum. But also, we're not an official agency of the British government involved in the left-hand area of that spectrum either. We're not an aid-giving organisation. We're not a grant-giving organisation. As I said earlier on, we're in the business of creating trust and understanding between people. So we're in the business of helping people to access opportunities, to help them improve their lives. We're in the business of exchange through dialogue, bringing people together who wouldn't necessarily normally have the opportunity to come together to discuss things, the issues of the day, and to help people to understand other cultures and other people better, what is termed public diplomacy. And also, moving a little bit more, we're in the business of creating spaces and opportunities for the UK and other organisations as partners in culture, education, business and diplomacy. So that's where we sit on this spectrum of cultural relations. Very briefly, just to explain how we decide on the sort of activities which we run in all these countries in the world. geopolitical drivers, what's happening in the world, have a huge influence on the work we do. We now operate in far more countries than we did 20 years ago because of the fall of the Soviet Union. We operate in parts of the world now which we weren't able to operate in previously. There are some parts of the world where we operated in previously which are less important to us in terms of geopolitical drivers. We're very, very keen on making sure that our offer of any kind meets the needs of the customers we serve, the people we deal with around the world. And of course, although only 15% of our funding comes from the British government, we are influenced by the policy, the direction, the strategy of the British government. The ambassador is not my boss. He can't tell me what to do, but I would be very stupid if I fell out with the ambassador here in Berlin, because there is a very important relationship there we need to manage. That all adds up to a corporate plan which we produced for 3 years. And these are our priorities in terms of our business areas. And I think you'll notice some interesting things about these priorities, which you might want to talk about afterwards. At the top is developing international opportunity and trust. Really important. That's what we're all about. It's our purpose. But also, working with people in all these countries in the world strengthens UK's excellence and comparative advantage. What the work we do with many people overseas brings back a huge amount of profit, as it were, to the UK in terms of helping UK develop its own excellence and its comparative advantage. Fitting with the Royal Charter, I said, is really absolutely essential. We have to make sure that we are strategically aligned with our Royal Charter. The British Council has the capability and fits the brand purpose. Everything we do has to be in line with our purpose and the brand which we have around the world, which is very valuable, which we need to protect. Another factor which defines what we do is around providing individual and institutional benefit to societies, the communities we work with. In addition, also providing clear benefit for the UK and meeting the demand in the UK. There's a mutuality there about working with other people to provide benefits to people we work with, but also benefits to the UK as well. Meeting market demand, particularly for some of our commercial services around the world, and income and partnership potential. So all those things are put together, prioritised, and our current strategy is to work in these 3 areas with these target groups of audiences. So in English, we work with policymakers, we work with teachers and learners worldwide. And we have an extensive online offer to help people, whether they're teachers, learners, anybody who's interested in learning English around the world. We work in the arts with big programs, but largely around new connections, which are about introducing new British artists to countries like Germany, for example, and showcasing events and activities. And in education and society, we work in the areas of schools, higher education, skills, youth and society, and governance and civil society. Just briefly, the values and benefits of our work as we see them worldwide are these. There's our portfolio on the left with the definition of our audiences we work with. The outcomes we're looking for are widespread and better quality teaching, learning and assessment of English. And so one of our major drivers, our major aims, is to improve the access to and the quality of learning and teaching and testing of English worldwide. So, for example, I don't know whether any of you are here from Germany, but we have large programs with the Ministers of Education of Saxony-Anhalt, Brandenburg, Berlin, Baden-Württemberg, to help those ministries develop their teachers and are able to teach more effectively. And of course, in other countries where you come from, we have very extensive programs too. In the arts, our key outcome is new ways of connecting with and understanding each other through the arts, using the arts to help people to think outside the box and understand each other better. Last night I was at an event where we had Dean Atter, a very well-known performance poet in the UK, who's about to publish his first collection of books, of poems, and I think is going to really hit the international stage. An attempt to use poetry to help people to understand each other better. And through in education society, our key outcome is enhanced leadership and shared learning from international education, and societies, and this it builds on the last speaker's presentation, societies whose young people, citizens, and institutions contribute to a more inclusive, open and prosperous world. If you like, that adds up to our purpose, which, as I said, is increased trust and increased opportunity. And the cultural value that brings is specified on the right there. The value of the UK in world education and English teaching sectors as far as English is concerned, the value of the UK in world creative industries, more trade and investment between the UK, so there's a prosperity agenda there, and more open societies with the UK and worldwide. So trust and opportunity adds up to a more secure, a more peaceful, a more prosperous world. Just to give you a little bit more detail, this is the matrix which we work with. We do lots of different things in many different countries, but if you boil everything down, because we need focus and we have to be strategic because of our resources are limited, then we do, on the whole, 6 major sorts of activities which are listed there across the 3 areas: English, the arts, education and society. I wanted to show you one of these slides. There's plenty more, but I'm just going to show you one of these slides because we've just published, well, a few months ago, what we consider to be some very important research called trust research. This was commissioned by and published by an independent organisation, Ipsos Mori. So we weren't involved in the actual process of the research, but it demonstrates quite clearly, and there's a lot more I can refer you to on this if you're interested, is that people who have had a cultural relations engagement with the UK increase their net trust of people in the UK, and these were the countries. There are more countries involved, but these were the major countries which were targeted for this research. And what we try to demonstrate, particularly because we need to make this clear to governments and other organisations, is that cultural relations builds trust and engagement, and it's a good thing. The world needs more cultural relations. I've been told it's almost time, so I'll conclude by just giving you a quick look at the sort of values which we embody as an organisation and work with, valuing people, integrity, mutuality, creativity and professionalism. Very important in our work, underpinned by a serious commitment to equal opportunity and diversity. This was a brief slide to show you, but I'm speeding up now in terms of how we evaluate the work we do. Through various surveys and models. There's no time to go into detail of that, but the middle bit, as it were, the impact of what we're seeking to achieve is measured by a series of tools. The trust research was a major part of that work, as well as looking at and analysing the satisfaction of customers. Evaluation is essential to the work we do, so we can demonstrate the value of the impact we're trying to achieve. And 2 slides to conclude with. Our ambition, I'll let you read it for yourselves. I think those words in heavy type are really quite important. Global network, to enlarge that network we can, to grow our commercial contract and partnership work, to deliver more cultural relations. We believe the world needs more cultural relations, creating more opportunities for people, more trust, and at less money to the UK government. A quick survey of some of the work we do. I hope many of you are familiar with the work of the British Council and the countries you come from, but big teaching projects at the top right-hand side in Kenya, a major exams operation in Afghanistan, centre right, one of our network programs in Pakistan, bottom left, an arts program in northern India at the bottom right, Anish Kapoor's exhibition which has toured major locations around the world, bottom left, a youth network program, middle left. At the top, the Shanghai exhibition with this fabulous piece of work for in the British Pavilion. In the middle, a rather traditional view of the United Kingdom, a programme we're working with with the British government at the moment as a legacy for the Olympics, which is called GREAT, as in Great Britain. So there is a quick tour d'horizon, quick view of what we understand by cultural relations and how we work in the world. If there's some time left, I'm happy to take a couple of questions or so.
Thank you very much, John Whitehead, for this brief. We know that the British Council, over the 7 or 8 decades that have been serving the international community in order to promote cultural exchange, needs more than 20 minutes, but I think you successfully tried to put us in the picture. Now we'll open the floor for like a couple of questions or comments. Yes.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. My name is Philip van Weupel. I spent some time in England, and what I observed is that a lot of native English young people are really closed in their mind and international understanding. So when you're talking about now the international view of English people and the global community, what is the situation in the UK on itself? Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for that interesting question. I'm happy to answer. I'm not quite sure I agree with your analysis about young people in the UK being closed, actually, but I can see where you're coming from, possibly. I mean, one really important aspect of the work we do is when we're working with people, with countries, with partners overseas, there always has to be a UK angle to it. So, for example, one of the programs I saw at the end of Mike's slide, although you weren't able to talk about it, is Connecting Classrooms program, which is a huge program worldwide to introduce young people in this case Germany and young people in the UK to different cultural aspects of life, and to help teachers internationalize the curriculum. Very large programs focusing on the UK. We have obviously huge support for the Erasmus program funded by the European Commission to enable young people in the UK to experience a study period or indeed a vocational training period in Europe. We have lots and lots of other programs which are working with communities in the UK too. So I think UK is one of the most multicultural, and I think arguably one of the most successful multicultural countries in Europe. Although the word multicultural in Germany is perhaps not such a popular word, and there's been lots of criticism of that term. But Germany, actually, surprisingly, has been looking to the UK to find out how we've worked on the inclusion agenda, so that they can perhaps get ideas for here. So I think the idea, there's a certain amount of truth in what you say, and you obviously lived in the UK and understand that. But I mean, the idea of the UK being an island off the edge of Europe, totally closed and not accessible or not interested in the rest of the world, I hope very much is a view which is really now decreasing quite dramatically, in spite of course, the press reports you read about the attitude of the United Kingdom in relation to the European Union. Don't believe everything you read in the press, is what I would say. But a very interesting question. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Christine Hausler of the British Institute of International and Comparative Law in London. You alluded towards the end the budget cuts in the UK, and you mentioned that your plan is to try to do more with less. And I'm just wondering how the cuts have affected you, and if you have any innovative examples of ways that you plan to do this.
Thank you. Another very topical question. I said that 15% of our income comes from the British government. So in a sense, actually, that's all relatively low. So 85% of our income we earn ourselves, as it were. I'll tell you a little bit about how we do that in a second. But yes, we were subject, of course, to government cuts of that 15%, like any other organisation, any other ministry or non-departmental public body, which we are, including organisations like the BBC. Everybody had to take their fair share of cuts, and we're living in a period of austerity, and things that we're told are not going to get better for a very long time. So, of course, the money which we get from the British government is constantly under threat. But in order to deliver our strategy of more cultural relations, we're increasingly working in partnership with other people. So we work on the one hand with the international and government agencies, for example, in Europe, a lot with the European Commission, but also with other organizations too, here in Germany with the foundations, the Marshall Fund, people like this. And we're getting increasingly better, not at saying, look, we've got something fantastic here, we can give it to you, do you want it, how much are you going to pay? We're moving a lot more towards co-creation of projects and programs to make sure we can meet other people's needs. Increasingly, we work commercially too. A lot of our work in some parts of the world, a lot of our English language teaching work, our examinations work is paid for by people who are able to pay for that work. We're working, I mentioned all the work we're doing with the Ministries of Education here in Germany. Well, that is cost recovery work, in the sense basically the Ministries of Education are funding that work and using us to deliver that work for them. We work with academic organisations. We work with the University of Coventry and Mike's department too, very often on a cost-sharing basis. So basically, the British Council is becoming what our chief executive has called an entrepreneurial public body. Public service is really important to us, absolutely essential. But we have to be entrepreneurial because we live in times where there isn't the sort of government money around which there was.